For Sunday, May 7th, you've found the Georgia gang. Topping our agenda, a federal judge oversteps the rule of Georgia voters. In the 6th Congressional District, the race appears to be dead even, and that corruption poll is widening at Atlanta City Hall. Some of the stories up for grabs on the Georgia gang.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia gang starts now.
And we're glad you could be with us on this Sunday in May. We begin with another change to the Georgia election process by an unelected federal judge. And we're lucky in this respect today because sitting in for Alexis, we have Kerry Ichter, who is an actual member of the bar. He doesn't just play one on television as the rest of us do.
And he doesn't know any elected federal judges, do you, Kerry?
Well, actually, this judge is a friend of mine. So.
Welcome, Kerry. Judge Stephen Batten, U.S. District Court judge in Atlanta, appointed by George W. Bush, so ostensibly a conservative, did the unprecedented this week. He said that Georgia must reopen registration for the runoff in the 6th Congressional District. That people too lazy or otherwise unengaged who didn't care to vote can now go register and vote in this race. I think it's outrageous. What say you?
Well, first of all, Judge Batten is Timothy Batten, and he, as I said, was a friend of mine and a law school classmate. He was a Bush appointee, so his opinions are not political. They're his best judgment about what the law is. And I have to say, after the Supreme Court has done what it has done over decades to states' rights, he's compelled to do it. This is a short version on it. In 1993, Democrats passed the National Voter Registration Act, which requires states to allow voters to register up to 30 days before an election. Mm-hmm. The problem with that in Georgia is that the Georgia law says that a runoff is part of the election that preceded it. So if you have a runoff, it's part of the same election. The national law, the National Voter Registration Act, says it's not. So the state law and the federal law have come into conflict.
And he, of course, chose the federal law.
He did.
Because he doesn't understand the will of the people of Georgia.
Yeah, that's so funny. Because federal law trumps state law, Dick. You know it, we all know it. And the fact of the matter is, whether or not you allow people to re-register or register again for the runoff, you could have skipped the primary and still voted in the runoff. So it's
which, by the way, I don't like either.
It's 6 or half dozen. It really doesn't much matter. But here's what does matter. That's an even race. And now more people can register to vote for Jon Ossoff, and it clearly gives him the advantage.
Well, there's no question about that. Phil, can Brian Kemp, the Secretary of State, all he does is lose cases in federal court? I think this is really going to hurt his run for governor. He can't win these routine cases, in my view. And now, can he register people in time for a June 20th runoff?
Well, let me address
it's complicated.
Let me address that in a second. I just want to jump into what my colleagues are saying here. The lawyers I talked to, Kerry, and I'd love to get your take on this too, is that, you know, wait a minute, what's the point of registering here? If you take this to the logical conclusion, why can't we vote in the first election? Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, it's like this judge, like they did with Roe v. Wade, just made this up out of whole cloth.
They didn't make it up out of whole cloth, Phil, and you know it. The law says that you get a 30-day period in which to register before a federal election. What is this? This is a federal election. Well, that's what it is.
Well,
obviously.
What we have here is a conflict between federal and state law, and the question is which of them should govern. And the elections clause, in a lucid interval, the Supreme Court said the election clause prescribes how elections are to be held, but not who may be allowed to vote in them. And what that should mean is that that's left to the states. The states should be making the rules, and do make the rules, about who is qualified to vote. This all came down to a question of whether or not being registered was a qualification. And the Supreme Court in some previous decisions has indicated that it does not regard registration as a qualification.
Okay, well, that's interesting. But let me pivot to your point on the politics of all of this. I think Brian Kemp is fighting the good fight. I don't see where that's going to damage him in a Republican primary. And of course, we can talk about this later. More and more people are getting into both party primaries.
Well, actually, I want to disagree with you. If the Democrats can take on Karen Handel, because she suggested buying some new chairs for the office, then why can't Republicans in a primary take on Brian Kemp for not hiring the right attorneys to win this original suit that got Judge Batten involved?
Well,
why are we having a 10-week runoff? Because Brian Kemp's people couldn't get the job done.
I think you just heard, though, from our friend Carrie Ichter why it didn't happen.
Well, that was the first suit I'm talking about. Gary wasn't referring that. That's kind of a different
But I
set
was
of
available if they wanted.
But let's go to the race itself. And Jeff, you set the stage a little bit. Poll this week released by the Democrats, so I think it's credible. In this instance, it shows John Ossoff ahead 48-47, 1 point, well within the margin of error.
Yeah,
Two ways of looking at it.
Why would that be credible?
Well, if you only had a 1 point lead, would you release the poll?
A lot of these internal polls make the candidate look good and try to boost momentum, and we know how
Would you
badly
release
polls. We know how badly polls did last November 8th.
Now, come on, Phil. He got 48% in the primary. Where's that 48% going to go? To Karen Handel?
It's going to be
still
close.
where it was.
Well, that's
you got other polls showing the momentum with both of them very close. If I look in the crystal ball, it's going to be a very close race. I don't put any credence.
Carrie,
in these
another
polls.
way you could look at it, Carrie, is this: you could say, if you're John Ossoff, if you release this poll, 48-47, only 5% undecided. Another way of looking at it is that Karen Handel has come up 27 points in 1 week.
Exactly, but I tend to agree with Phil. If you take a look at Brexit, you take a look at Trump, take a look at so many places where the pollsters have got it completely wrong. If I was John Ossoff and I saw I was up by a point or two, I'd be sweating bullets.
Well, yeah, thank you. You expressed it much more succinctly than I did. Now, on the fundraising side, we talked ad nauseum, of course, about the amazing amount of money that John Ossoff has raised from leftist forces all over the country. And he's apparently raised another $4.5 million for television. Did you notice that one of the local TV stations added a newscast until June 20th?
Right.
Yes.
Just to contain so many commercials in this race. That's amazing. News as public service or news as cash cow. That station ought to really re-examine its thinking. But anyway, the Republican money, as you predicted, Jeff, has come to pass.
Absolutely, absolutely. You all
4
were
million
complaining-
here and 4
you
million
all were
there, and suddenly
complaining
Karen Handel's
during the primary about all of this Democratic left-leaning money coming into Georgia, and now the tables, of course, have turned as we expected during the runoff election, with an awful lot of Republican money. Not only that, but a Republican president coming in to campaign for Karen Handel.
Well, she raised $750,000 with him last week in Atlanta at a fundraiser. She went to a Washington fundraiser with Paul Ryan. I understand Paul Ryan might be coming into the district.
Who, by the way,
none of this is
and I want to say
very
this. I
surprising.
mean,
This
for me, this
isn't
isn't some, liberal versus conservative. I know Karen Handel. We all do. We've known her for years, known her for decades. She's a good lady. She's a moderate Republican.
And your point?
The point is that when we're talking about Democrat versus Republican, we have to keep in mind that Karen Handel is somebody who's been around for a long time
we also have
and
to
has got some friends on both sides.
Oh, okay.
I thought you were going somewhere else.
I get your point now, but let's talk about Karen Handel and John Ossoff.
Let's do it after a break.
And you compare it, and Ossoff trying to be a moderate and yet getting money, from all sorts of left-wing groups.
Well, say it. Just say it. Say the two most hated words in Georgia. Go ahead and say who gave John Ossoff $2,000.
Does the name Jane Fonda ring a bell?
I've heard of her.
The traitor from the Vietnam era. Just one quick
Should have been
example.
tried. Should have been tried. Should have faced the bar of justice.
But lastly, Ossoff says
God,
he's running
man, you all.
Ossoff says he's running a positive campaign. He's been so negative on Karen Handel.
You wallow in
We gotta get
ancient
out.
history.
We gotta get out. We're not even touching the surface of this race. This is the best. When we come back, we'll take another angle. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
Okay, that runoff race in the 6th CD is June 6th, June 20th. Oh man, June 20th. Should have been a month earlier, of course, but we've already discussed that. But I think we should look into this month, May. It's sort of inside baseball, but there's a runoff for a state Senate seat in Cobb County, in the heart of the 6th district. The Senate seat is totally in the borders of the 6th, and you've got a Republican, Kay Kirkpatrick, in a runoff with a newbie Democrat named Christine Tribish. And I hope I'm pronouncing it properly. Tribish. And that could be very telling as to what's going to happen in the runoff, Phil, between Ossoff and Handel.
You're making a good point. That election is May 16th, and the early voting starts Monday in that district. So what's going to happen is, again, turnout will be the key, just like in the bigger 6th district race. The Democrat, you talk about radicals like we did in the first, the Democrat has been embraced by Maxine Waters, who was one of the most radical Democrats. Even John Ossoff scurried away and didn't want to see him at the recent Democrat dinner here in Atlanta. This is a Republican-leaning state Senate district, so it'll be interesting to see the numbers.
Okay, let's turn more to state news now. We've got weeks ahead on this runoff. It is the most fascinating congressional race, or race of any kind, really, in Georgia in the last 20 years, in my view. Can you think of one that's been more different? It's just fun to talk about.
But it's fun to talk about.
Governor Deal this week surprised me, not you and others, but he surprised me by signing the campus carry bill.
We predicted that, right, Jeff?
But there have been lots of changes in that bill since he vetoed it a year ago. And we should note, too, Karen Handel endorsed that bill, which we're talking about her, Jeff, as a moderate Republican. She endorsed that campus carry bill. And Ossoff, of course, attacked her for that. At any rate, the governor sort of returned to the true church of conservatism, Phil.
Well, you know what? I don't think this is a conservative bill. I think this is a common sense bill that it looks out for the public safety of students in urban areas. The governor rightly said, and we've been talking about this for over a year now, is students have been sitting ducks in these urban areas, whether it's Tech or Georgia State or over at Augusta University. When they come and go, the governor rightly
stressed that.
The governor rightly said that. Now a student can walk through a bad neighborhood and go into the classroom and you can go in the classroom and then leave the classroom and go back through that neighborhood safer than he was. Yes, you can.
No, a student can't, because a student might be 19. Student might be
21.
Student might be 18.
You know darn well what the bill says.
You know darn well that 75% of the kids cannot take advantage of this. And what is this really? This is an NRA bill in an NRA state with an NRA legislature, and that's really all it is. You don't have a college president in this state who is in favor of that bill.
Actually,
not one.
That's not true. They can't speak out. That's
not
true. But this is a Second Amendment issue, and you ought to be, since you carry and you've got a gun collection, you ought to be for the
Second Amendment issue. Look, we cannot have guns on campus and still have the Second Amendment.
I just want to ask Kerry.
I'm glad he's upset.
I just want to ask Kerry in his law lecturing posture this morning, which we've thrust him. Does the campus carry bill discriminate against 18, 19-year-old, and 20-year-old students who are certainly old enough to pick up a rifle and go fight and die for the country, but they can't carry a pistol to protect themselves against thugs in a parking lot?
I'm sure it'll be the next NRA issue. Sorry, Kerry.
I think it probably does.
Yeah.
But so what? It's a compromise. That's what government is all about. So what?
I mean, if the government, if the Georgia legislature, if the governor really believes that more guns increase safety, then why are they excluded from athletic and sporting events, from student housing, from preschools and children care spaces, from classrooms, from faculty, staff, and administrative offices and disciplinary proceedings? Those things not need safety?
We'll have to step it up under a new governor.
You know what? You don't want somebody shooting the punter when he shanks one.
Actually, that might be understandable.
You can't have somebody shooting the free thrower when he misses.
I think that would have been a great argument maybe 15, 20 years ago, but this is the 21st century. Times have changed. Murder rates are up in Atlanta and elsewhere.
I went to it.
And you know, if one life can be saved, there was a concealed carry guy just over in Texas the other day. Some maniac was about to go on a rampage. He just had his concealed carry weapon, shot him, killed him, saved probably dozens of people.
We don't know how many potential terrorists could be in a place like this. So last Sunday, I went to a Atlanta United game, my first professional soccer game.
It was a disappointing one, too.
Oh, it was a disappointing one. They lost 3-1. But let me tell you what they did. They searched every individual who entered Bobby Dodd Stadium, Phil, and rightfully so. I don't want to be in a stadium like that with a potential terrorist. There's a reason why you can't have a gun in that situation.
I understand, and I sympathize with you. However, the flip side of the coin, as you well know, is a good Samaritan who has a concealed carry weapon, who can save a life when a nut is out there shooting. That's the flip side of the coin, Jeff.
Let me quickly change the subject, because there was some good news, again, related to the governor signing of bills and all. the State Department of Transportation, Russell McMurray, announced that the I-85 collapse, the big hole in the road, could be fixed will be fixed before Memorial Day. It looks like, right, Kerry?
Yes.
I think they said maybe even May 16th, 20th. Was it that early?
Depending on the weather.
Right.
Your great line when you were sitting in for Phil, you missed it. When he talked about the state leaving kindling under the expressway.
I've used it so many times.
You're welcome.
And
Small royalty. Small royalty.
and we should also note for the record, as we get out of this segment, that Casey Cagle declared for governor. He didn't tell us. He cut a deal with the AJC, met with them in private, then had a campaign announcement after the Georgia gang was taped. And then his deal with the AJC was so good, they didn't even put him on the front page. Lesson learned there for Casey Cagle, but maybe not.
Very good.
Maybe not.
And you know, Stacey Abrams on the Democrat side.
She didn't tell us either, did she?
Didn't tell us either. Maybe Jeff knew about it. But she announced for governor.
Yeah, Casey.
Only black people talk to each other? Is that what you mean?
All right, we got to get out. When we come back, corruption at City Hall. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
And I think there is a great deal of public interest in the so-called corruption probe at the Atlanta City Hall, with the subpoenas flying and those millions of pages of documents assembled there in City Hall. A couple of developments worth pointing out: that Mitzi Bickers, who was a get-out-the-vote specialist for Kasim Reed in his run for re-election, she's now the subject of a herd of subpoenas flying all around Clayton County, where she is a chaplain to the jail, which is overseen by the infamous Sheriff Victor Hill. But there are indications that not only is the probe in Clayton County, but there's new stuff in Atlanta that might touch, for example, the city council.
Well, that's right. And just to kind of set the stage, after November 8th, the U.S. Attorney's Office here has really stepped things up along with the FBI. Some of this has already been reported, but my sources tell me that just last week more FBI agents were assigned to the U.S. Attorney's Office because, you point out, it's a widening probe. And again, my sources tell me that there's city council people being looked at. And I think that we talked about a couple weeks ago how the airport contracts are being looked at. And just for the viewers, you had the Chief Procurement Officer, Adam Smith, summarily just dismissed on a Friday afternoon and marched out of his office, and he's talking to the feds, and he's going to be able to tell a lot.
Well, from somebody who does a lot of document productions, you don't produce 1.4 million documents in paper to be transparent. You take those documents, you put them into an electronic format that is searchable, so that the people who get them are able to use them. But the idea of giving 1.4 million documents...
Which is what Mayor Kasim Reed did.
That's what he initially did, and then when the electronic versions became available, they made them available. But initially, it was hard copy documents. But you know, there was a demand for these documents early on. They wanted to meet that demand. They did so in the only form that was available, and the electronic versions followed. This has been going on for years now, these talks of subpoenas flying in this county and that county. And what we don't have is a single charge of bribery or a single charge of accepting a bribe. Not one. All we have is insinuation and rumor. Well, last week, or a couple of weeks ago, there were rumors flying that there were going to be 20 or 24 indictments handed down.
Not on this broadcast.
Not on this broadcast, but it was viral. It was all over the city.
Does the name E.R. Mitchell mean anything to you?
It means...
Did you know what happened to E.R. Mitchell?
It means that someone pled guilty under duress to attempting to commit a bribe. Attempting. Okay. Did you not get the attempting part?
I got that. I just wanted, I wanted the viewers to hear you say it.
Yeah, because I have not yet seen the indictment or that flurry of indictments that was supposed to come 2 weeks ago. I thought that's what you were going to talk about and keep the rumor mill going.
I'm waiting for it.
I admire your wanting to stick to the facts here, so I'll help you. The fact is, E.R. Mitchell did pay someone to grease his contracts.
No, Mitchell. Well, wait a minute.
He paid money. Now he may have been the world's worst.
He may have paid a consultant to lobby for him.
Well, he also could have been the world's worst bribery guy. Maybe he bribed the wrong people.
And you know, you pointed out, Dick, on the show a few weeks ago that E.R. Mitchell, of course, was involved in heavily inflating work done with his invoices during Snowmageddon. You know who signed off on that? Was Peter Amon, who was in the Reid administration at the time. I think that's going to hurt him and his mayoral run.
Depends on how it went down. Listen, that Snowmageddon thing.
Well, you don't sign off on inflated invoices.
You know what? We're out of time to discuss this. I want to just touch on it briefly. The judge in DeKalb County who did away with the DeKalb County Ethics Board as it's currently constituted. It's interesting. That's already reached into Gwinnett County. And Tommy Hunter, who's under fire up there, the commissioner who made some nasty comments about John Lewis, he may walk on the ethics charges because their ethics board has a similar setup to DeKalb County.
Well, what the problem is, you're having private people and private organizations on these boards.
And you can't do it. And state law clearly says, as well as case law clearly says, that you can't do it. Dwight Thomas made a great argument in that case, and he won it.
Now, I would say this. As horrible as some speech can be and insulting, racist, or stupid, or whatever it is, I don't see where an ethics board can find and get rid of a Tommy Hunter in Gwinnett County.
I can't remember if the Gwinnett County powers extend to removing him or just admonishing him or perhaps fining him.
Well,
I don't remember that.
I believe they can fine him, but I just don't understand how speech could be involved. They're as reprehensible as the speech may be.
Okay,
the voters can.
Well, we'll see where.
That's the ultimate.
Yes.
I agree. I think we all agree.
Well,
on that.
and John Lewis, and as I said, John Lewis, and I was proud of him. He said about Tommy Hunter, he said, "Yeah, Tommy Hunter's got to face the voters." I forgive him.
We all
agree
with
still got to
that.
face that. All right, that will do it. Boy, we were talkative. When we come back, winners and losers.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
And remember us on YouTube, and remember Facebook. Well, we like to chat back and forth. Phil and I do anyway. Jeff, you do occasionally, I think. Let's begin winners and losers with you, Jeff.
Well, thank you, Dick. Former Fulton County Commissioner Joan Garner passed away, and memorial service was yesterday. She was a terrific lady, and I think just loved universally by everybody. And so, certainly want to salute her. And we have not mentioned the death of Ton Teepin, which former editorial page editor at the Atlanta Constitution. I would like to recognize him as well. He did a lot of good work in town in his day. This story about the federal penitentiary and this lady, Kelly Bass, who had a Square Cash app and made $4,000 shuttling folks in and out with tequila and cell phones and cigars and all kinds of stuff. Fascinating story. I think it's stranger than fiction.
Is she your winner?
just.
Still are.
Is she a criminal or is she a...
News of the weird.
Or an entrepreneur.
Is she a criminal or an entrepreneur? That's the question.
She's definitely an entrepreneur.
All right, Kerry.
Well, one of my winners is Jimmy Kimmel, although I don't agree with all of his politics. His discussion of his infant son's heart problems and the sort of caring and complete love for that son that he put on display, I think was touching and was a great message to all parents. And I think that the loser is pretty much all the airlines.
Good point.
I cannot imagine how they think they can continue to abuse passengers in the way that they do. And the only thing I can say is, thank goodness they do a better job with safety than they do with customer relations.
Phil.
Well, I will go back and make a winner, Governor Deal, as we had discussed, for signing the campus carry bill.
I think so.
Reaffirming Second Amendment rights. We're getting more and more back. And also the NRA had a big convention over at the World Congress Center here in Atlanta. 80,000 people showed up. Quite a time. But the loser was the Atlanta Journal.
Safest place in town, wasn't it?
It was. The loser, though, and you'll appreciate this especially, Dick, is the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. If you read the newspaper there Sunday at the height of the convention, or Monday, Monday and the aftermath, all they had was gun control stories. There was no balance. There were no stories of why are these people here, why are they members of the NRA. And my last winner is Georgia Tech. They had as a commencement speaker the president of Panama, who was a Tech graduate back in 1985. It really is a world-class university. I even say that as a Georgia Bulldog. I'll probably be attacked for that.
Is the new guy in the Philippines, is he a Georgia Bulldog?
No.
Okay, I'm sorry, I couldn't resist. All right, I'm going to pick up and bash the AJC too. In a column by one of their top editors about the surprising performance of John Ossoff, the writer said that it was a refreshing outbreak of democracy, as if Republican politics in a Republican district are not representative of a democracy. Now, he was talking about redistricting, but it was a refreshing outbreak of democracy. Now, let's see, if a white Republican got elected mayor of Atlanta, would he call that a refreshing outbreak of democracy? I don't think so. And the loser this week, any other week, I'm not even going to glorify the guy, Stephen Colbert. Any one of us would be gone in 60 seconds. See you next week on the Georgia Gang.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.